Welcome again to our Communication Access Planning Workshop. We apologize for those of us who've heard this now 3 times, but we are so glad that you are here. And we will be focusing on communication access planning, specifically working with behavioral healthcare and thinking about all the related services that are involved. We do not have CEUs for the session. If you are attending live and you want a certificate of attendance, please email me and I will drop that in the chat once we get started. The PowerPoints and follow-up information will be emailed next week. And we also have a session on May 15th focused on hearing assistive technology and national resources. It's not too late to register, and I will send you that information as well. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters today. First, we have Dr. Kendall Ramsey. Dr. Ramsey is a clinical audiologist at the Lexington Hearing and Speech Center. She's passionate about improving communication and the quality of life of all individuals with hearing loss. She and her husband are from Richmond, Kentucky. They enjoy spending time together bowling, playing board games, and admiring their 3 cats. She's also the previous vice chair of our advisory committee on the need for services for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, and still a member of that advisory committee. And we are so grateful for the time and effort she put in today for creating this PowerPoint. We also have Tracy Lundergan. Tracy lives in Louisville with her husband, John, 2 sons, Matthew and Josh, and their German Shepherd, Zoe. She's been a captioner or court reporter with McClendon-Kogut Reporting Service for 30+ years. And last but not least, we have Peggy Ward. Peggy Ward is the outreach coordinator for Hamilton Relay. She's been assisting Kentuckians statewide with relay services for 5 years now. She graduated from Middle Tennessee State University, but her education and love for the deaf started as a child. Peggy is a CODA, or a child of deaf adults, that understands how important relay services and other resources are for the deaf, deafblind, hard of hearing, and speech difficulty communities. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her 2 rescue dogs. Apparently dogs related to this webinar have to have a Z name because her dogs are named Zika and Zola. So we are so glad to have all of you here today. And I am going to invite you, Dr. Ramsey, to take it away. And I'm going to invite the rest of you to turn off your cameras so that we can more clearly see everyone. Thank you so much. Dr. Ramsey, we can't see you anymore.
Okay. Da, da, da.
There you are.
Okay,
All right.
okay. It's like I don't know how to pen myself. Here we are. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. My name is Kendall Ramsey. I'm a clinical audiologist at Lexington Hearing and Speech Center. I see patients of all ages, everything from itty bitty 2-week-old babies to patients planning their 100th birthday party. My daily responsibilities are to identify hearing loss, help people treat their hearing problems, and to counsel them and their loved ones about topics surrounding hearing loss treatment and prevention. My goal for today is to help you understand hearing loss and how it may affect clinic appointments. Our first slide here shows what's on the agenda for today. First, I'll give you an introduction to hearing loss and its impact on people. Then we'll talk about barriers to hearing healthcare and also myths about hearing healthcare. Next, I will highlight signs of hearing loss so you can identify which of your patients may need communication modifications because some of them won't tell you outright that they have hearing problems. Then I'll give you practical communication strategies that are a good rule of thumb for all conversations, not just people who have hearing loss. Next, I'll review clinical accommodations that can make spoken language accessible for patients with hearing loss. The Americans with Disabilities Act mandates that communication must be accessible for all individuals, including those with hearing loss. And lastly, I want you to have a list of community resources that are focused on serving people with hearing loss. Once you know how impactful hearing loss is on a person, I know you will want to help patients address it as best as they can. This is a diagram of the chain of communication. I like how clearly it breaks down all the factors and steps that have to be working to have successful communication. It's surprisingly more complicated than the expected two-step process of talking and listening. It relies on the speaker to encode their idea into understandable sentences and to clearly speak the words through the listening environment. And then the listener must hear the speech enough to decode and interpret the words to formulate a response and become the talker. As you can see, there are so many opportunities for miscommunication to happen. The most modifiable steps in the communication chain are how clearly something is said, the setting and the context in which something is said, and the listener's reception of those words. So, as an audiologist, the patient and I will work towards their receptive goals together. That's on us. And here, there are tools and tricks that you can use as a clinician to help decrease the risk of miscommunications in these two steps of communication. So I'm here to share my expertise and to give you concrete, practical ways to make your conversations more effective. In fact, with universal communication accommodations, this chain of communication will take less energy from you and less energy from your patient, whether they have a hearing loss or not. I am going to start with some background information about hearing loss and why does it matter to health care clinicians. Well, to start with, hearing loss is a fairly common disability. Odds are you have worked or will work with a person who has a hearing loss. 3 out of 1,000 newborns are born with permanent hearing. Babies can be born with it for several reasons or acquire hearing loss from a traumatic birth. By school age, 3% of kids will have permanent hearing loss. That number increases to 15 to 20% of people by the age of 18. And as people get older, they can acquire hearing loss from many damaging factors. Head trauma, chronic ear infections, important life-saving medications can damage hearing. Viral or bacterial infections can cause hearing damage. Also, broader health issues like diabetes or heart disease increase the risk of hearing damage. But probably the most common cause of hearing damage is noise-induced hearing loss. In fact, hearing loss with aging is typically caused by the amount of noise exposure accumulated over a lifetime and a person's genetic predisposition to hearing damage. Noise exposure never leaves our ears and starts as soon as we're born. This is why hearing protection is so important around loud noises like concerts, engines and motors, power tools, firearms, and fireworks. As you can see with these statistics, hearing loss can happen at any age. And it's important to know that no matter the age of the person, hearing loss has wide-reaching effects. These effects are often internal and not as noticeable to those around us. There are a couple of impacts I'd like to talk about. First up is memory. Hearing loss impacts a person's memory acutely and long term. The memory center of the brain is located in the hearing cortex, and so when the hearing cortex isn't working well, it's harder to file information away to remember. Also, a person can't remember what they didn't hear. The newest research shows that adults with untreated hearing loss, even if it's mild, are at a 30% increased risk of developing Alzheimer's or dementia than adults with treated hearing loss or with normal hearing. In fact, functional MRI studies show brains with hearing loss will use other areas of the brain when listening. This incorrect wiring of the brain means that it's using energy from the visual cortex and the frontal cortex to listen and understand. Because these areas are working to fill in gaps in communication, they cannot do their other jobs at the same time. It appears that the human brain values communication and hearing above and at the expense of other tasks, such as creating memory, executive functioning, and processing other visual information. Hearing loss can also increase the risk of anxiety. This is because what others say takes more attention than it does for people with normal hearing sensitivities. Anxiety can also arise from a reduced sense of auditory cues in the environment. Many dangers are preceded by a sound or an alarm. If a person cannot easily hear the alarm or sound, it will increase their focus, attention, and anxiety. For example, walking in a parking lot, someone may not be able to hear a car or a person approaching them as they walk. They have to keep a more vigilant eye out for their surroundings. They're at a higher chance of being startled by others. Another worry that comes up pretty often for my patients is that they won't hear the smoke detector if it alerts, especially when they are asleep with or without their hearing aids. Anxiety and depression often go together. Research studies show higher rates of depression in people with hearing loss than in the population without hearing loss. Hearing loss can prevent or reduce the amount of social connection and activities they can participate in. A person may find it too difficult to keep up with the instructions or conversations and will avoid going. I think all of us can empathize with a situation where someone made a joke or a comment and we missed it for some reason. Humor doesn't always carry into a retelling, and it feels so lonely and isolating to be the only person who isn't laughing with the group. One impact of hearing loss you may not know is it can negatively affect someone's balance. The inner ear is not just the sensory organ for hearing, it's also the sensory organ for our sense of balance. People who have hearing loss often experience poorer balance, which can impact their mobility or coordination. Adults and children with hearing loss may have a higher risk of falling. You may want to be mindful about your walking speed when bringing a patient back or warning them of floor transitions, such as from a hard surface to a carpet or a floor elevation change, such as a step up or a step down. Lastly, let's talk about listening fatigue. If understanding what someone says requires gathering extra information, it will create listening fatigue. The information they may be keeping track of is body language, facial expressions, lip and mouth movements, and guessing what was said based on the context of the conversation. Listening fatigue is worse when the communication is important, lengthy, emotional, or complex. This is something to absolutely keep in mind when talking with patients about deeper topics. Emotional reactions such as sadness, frustration, and anger may come up more quickly or may be a larger reaction than expected because the person is fatigued from listening. A child with a hearing loss will be ready for a nap and some snacks at the end of their school day. Their brain has been working in overdrive just to access the information being taught in their classes. They're like ducks on a pond. From the outside view, they're just gliding smoothly with little effort, but under the water, their little feet are kicking furiously just to stay moving forward. These factors may explain confusing behavior or some default stressors for patients with hearing loss. Next, I have a short video that illustrates how difficult it can be to use non-hearing clues to communicate. It also shares why someone may choose certain communication styles or modalities when the cultural norms are made for hearing people.
So when I was really young, probably kindergarten or first grade, I have a much older brother, and we'd go out to recess.
I really like that video. And there at the end, she summarizes what all humans are looking and hoping for, which is human connection. Something important to take away from this presentation is that communicating with people who have hearing loss can look unique from person to person. To understand the variety of communication needs, you first need to have a brief understanding of what hearing devices can do for people with hearing loss. So let's start by busting some myths. Some common myths about hearing devices are that they can restore hearing to normal or near normal. which is not quite correct. Unfortunately, the inner ear does not have healing capabilities. And so, with our current science and medicine, we do not have a way of healing hearing damage. There's some promising breakthroughs happening, so maybe in the future, hearing can be restored. And because a person's hearing damage is not healed with hearing aids, that also means that hearing aids and cochlear implants won't work perfectly on the first day. I let patients know that they can expect to be hearing more sounds in the world when they take the devices out of my office, and that not all of those sounds will be ones they want to hear. There are so many annoying and quote unimportant sounds that they did not miss with their hearing loss. However, if hearing device users want to improve their speech reception, they'll have to suffer through hearing all the sounds and let their brain learn to filter the annoying ones out. Everyone can habituate to sounds over time. For example, whenever I move somewhere new, there are new house and road sounds to get used to. Sometimes there's something as disruptive as a train track or an airport near my new place. But no matter what, after a few weeks of living there, I start to not notice those sounds as prominently anymore. I always warn people the first few weeks are the most uncomfortable in the treatment process can get. And if they can get through that, then the hearing devices will work for them. I sometimes have people tell me I'm too old or I'm too young for hearing aids, and I have to educate them that hearing loss is not a sign that you are old. Hearing loss happens at any age. I tell patients I fit babies with hearing aids regularly, and that surprises them. Another thing my patients of all ages tell me is that their hearing loss isn't bad enough for a hearing aid. So, one thing I try and educate people is that mild hearing losses still cause biologic and social impacts that can be major. Another thing to keep in mind is that the habituation process and the person's success with a hearing device is almost always smoother when hearing loss is treated earlier rather than later. Lastly, something I hear so often is I don't want my hearing aids to show. And I understand hearing loss is stigmatized by our culture, and often there's even more stigma associated with hearing loss in non-American cultures. As an audiologist, it's my job to help people feel comfortable with their identity as a person with hearing loss and as a person who uses a hearing device. And sometimes that's with counseling and practicing responses to questions from family, friends, and colleagues. Or sometimes that's choosing devices that blend with their natural skin and hair coloring. Though I found that people who fear hearing devices showing the most are those who imagining they need large, clunky, loud, whistling devices like the hearing aids that were on the market 10 to 15 years ago. Most hearing aids on the market today are much smaller, sleeker, and better at treating hearing loss with more comfortable and clear sound quality. To combat stigma and help my patients make the best decisions for themselves, I always invite them to a follow-up appointment a week or two after their hearing evaluation, where I can show them what devices look like, sound like, and their expected pricing. It's a free appointment without pressure or to purchase devices, and it gives them a chance to ask questions about their hearing, the neat sound technology, and the treatment timeline and expectations. Hearing aids are updated as fast as technology is updated. Companies come out with new hearing aids just as often as the new iPhone arrives. Let me just show you a few devices and tell you about them. Hearing aids come in a lot of shapes, sizes, and colors. Hearing aids are ear-worn, complex machines that are programmed uniquely for a patient. Hearing aid programming is a very personalized process, which is why I recommend seeing a doctor of audiology for hearing aid fittings. But there are people out there who are certified to fit hearing aids called hearing instrument specialists, and There are over-the-counter hearing devices that let people fit the hearing aids themselves. Hearing aids work by having microphones collect sound from the environment, it cleans the sound up, and then recreates that sound with loudness adjustments based on the person's hearing sensitivity. As I've already mentioned, hearing aids require the patient to adjust to them at the beginning and will also require various adjustments over time as the brain adapts to hearing more of the world again. I have pictures of the hearing system on the next few slides, and I wanted to include the whole system to emphasize that hearing really happens in the brain. It doesn't happen in our ears. The ears and the nerve are just the messengers to the brain who puts the information together into meaning. Another treatment option for hearing loss is a cochlear implant. Cochlear implants are ear-worn, complex machines that are programmed uniquely for a patient, just like a hearing aid. There's one major difference between the two. After the microphones collect sound from the environment, the processor converts that sound into electrical stimulation, which is applied directly onto the patient's hearing nerve. This option is helpful when a person's hearing loss is severe and hearing aids cannot provide enough sound to stimulate the nerve. It's also a helpful option if hearing aids are only sending louder but not clearer signals to the nerve. Poor sound quality from properly fit hearing aids can happen when structures of the middle and inner ear are missing or are damaged enough to not be reliable. Skipped a paragraph here. People with cochlear implants had surgery to have a device implanted into the inner ear with electrodes connecting directly to the hearing nerve. The implanted inner device gets sound information from the outer device through this really cool magnetic connection that's strong enough to hold and talk through the skin of the head. Without that communication, like when somebody has their cochlear implant off, that inner device is silent, meaning it doesn't send electrical signals to the nerve. So that person may be able to hear with whatever residual hearing they had before they had the surgery, but largely it's just quiet when the outer device is off. And I must admit, I am often jealous of my patient's ability to choose to stop hearing when they want to. For example, when I'm laying in bed at night and I can hear my cats zooming around the living room, I wish I could just turn my ears off to ignore them. Or when I'm on an airplane and there's a baby that is crying, I wish I could mute my hearing and enjoy the silence. People with hearing loss have that chance, and that's pretty enviable. As the video we watched showed, some people choose not to treat hearing loss with hearing devices and instead choose to communicate through a manual language such as American Sign Language. American Sign Language is a full language with grammar, dialects, slang, and humor. What most hearing people don't know is that ASL is not English translated into gestures. It's a different language with different ways of building stories and connecting. The deaf community is rich with culture, history, and shared experiences, just like any other group with a shared language. One important thing to remember is that a fundamental language difference may mean that their written English skills or English reading comprehension may take more effort or might not be as robust as an English speaker. This isn't meant to be stated as a deficit, it's just to highlight that ASL is more different from English than just being visual. When we write and text with ASL speakers, we are often asking them to code switch into English. Deaf-blind individuals may need to use tactile sign language, which uses their sense of touch to receive information. A tactile interpreter would be present at their appointment to interpret spoken language into a signed language often pressed or presented into their hands. Other manual language systems require the person to have hearing devices or residual hearings and use hand signs to clarify what sounds are being made. For example, man and ban look identical when lip reading without audio input. You can go ahead and mouth those words to yourself. Not only do they feel the same, many of the tongue's positioning isn't obvious to an outside observer. Only about 30% of speech sounds can actually be identified with lip reading. Cued speech is one way to give a person with hearing loss supplemental information to read. This mode of communication is losing popularity as time goes on and is more common in the Western United States than it is in Kentucky. People who use ASL do not often have the same range of impacts that we talked about earlier. They're still at a higher risk of anxiety and depression due to marginalization in our culture. They're still at risk of balance issues due to physical differences in their inner ears. But they don't have the same increased risk of Alzheimer's and dementia that research has seen thus far, because their auditory cortex, where the area of memory is stored, is being stimulated by visual language. The hearing cortex will convert from being specialized in hearing to an area that processes visual language, vocabulary, and spatial awareness. One thing we do know is that many people do not seek out hearing health care when they could benefit from it. Reporting measures indicate that only 1 in 5 people who would benefit from hearing devices have them and use them. Why? Well, unfortunately, there are many barriers to accessing hearing healthcare and also some limitations to hearing healthcare. These barriers include the cost. The cost of hearing aids are known to be expensive devices. A set of hearing aids can be anywhere from $1,200 to $7,000 or more. Another surprising fact is that hearing aids are often not covered by insurance. Hearing, vision, and dental are all excluded services outside of normal health care costs. Another barrier is a lack of access to hearing care services in rural and underserved areas. Daily hearing aid compliance is important for treatment, and the biggest barrier to following through on hearing loss is unrealistic expectations of hearing aids. A patient may be uninformed on how long adaptation can take, or they expect normal hearing abilities should be restored, or they want the hearing aid to work without cleaning the devices and maintaining them daily. Counseling to set expectations prior to purchasing the devices helps, but it does not resolve unrealistic expectations for many people. Another barrier we've already discussed is the stigma of hearing aids. In our minds, or in the minds of patients, their invisible disability of a hearing loss becomes a visible one with a hearing device. People are afraid that people will think they are old and therefore irrelevant, or that they are disabled, incapable, or unintelligent. You know, glasses used to have a larger stigma around them in the past, and now they've pivoted to be a fashion statement with less negative associations around them. And so if glasses can have a public relations turnaround, I expect hearing aids can do it too. Less hearing aid stigma would be one less barrier to hearing healthcare and would be a demonstrable win in decreasing ageism and ableism in America. And the last barrier I want to discuss is the pervasive lack of awareness of the impacts of hearing loss. The statements like, my hearing loss isn't that bad, and I don't need a hearing aid yet, are from people who really believe they don't have hearing problems. I've seen people function with pretty significant hearing losses and have no idea how much effort they were putting into hearing until we get them properly fit with hearing devices. These patients are incredible, but they also are at a huge disadvantage because the longer they waited to treat their hearing loss, the greater the risk their hearing nerve and cortex will have started to weaken or rewire, and thus increase their risk of cognitive decline and memory issues. Okay, that was a lot of background information. Thanks for sticking with me through Audiology 101. With all that information, you may have some questions, so please take a second to write them down. Go ahead and put them in the chat. I will address questions during the Q&A session at the end of today's speakers. So let's talk about signs of hearing loss. If children and wives of newly retired men can spot them, those are usually the patients who are coerced into getting their hearing tested. So can you. Well, some obvious signs are when a person asks for repetition frequently or when they speak with a louder than necessary volume. Other more subtle signs may be that they lean or tilt one ear closer to you when you're talking. You may notice they watch your face and your lips closely with unblinking or unshifting focus. Many of us naturally lip read without noticing we do it, but when someone has a hearing loss, they likely rely on it more heavily. The person may have a consistent listening face that reveals the effort that they're putting into understanding what's being said. My sister squints her eyes when I'm processing auditory information, and I telegraph my efforts through furrowed eyebrows. Others may frown or seem frustrated or purse their lips. People with hearing loss may also intentionally position themselves in relation to you and move with you if you move. This is more obvious when you're not sitting down. I have several friends that when we walk somewhere together, they constantly want to be on my right or on my left because they know that's their better hearing ear and they have a better chance of hearing me while I talk on the move. When talking to someone with a hearing loss, they often step closer or lean closer to try to hear me better. Sitting on the edge of their seat may not be just because of anxiety in your appointments. It may also be an attempt to hear better. One sign that's often overlooked or downplayed is when someone responds with something majorly off topic or unrelated. We all jump around in conversations at times, but if someone mishears what is being said, they can respond with surprising statements. I always advocate for teachers and counselors to use this kind of unrelated topic to check in on their understanding of the conversation. You can do this with something like, are we still talking about X? Inserting whatever the subject of the conversation had been. This gentle question can help get them back on track without triggering embarrassment or defensiveness. Pausing while you talk to them and checking in can help clear up confusion as well. Everyone copes with hearing loss in unique ways. One coping strategy I see often is when someone dominates the conversation. This person does not let anybody get a word in edgewise and may also talk over top of others because they didn't realize someone else was speaking. Another person with a hearing loss may withdraw from the conversation when it gets too difficult. They go silent or they find something to busy themselves with. This can be mistaken as boredom or disinterest. Another person may watch other group members closely to follow along or mirror responses such as laughing when others do or look sad in response to a story they cannot hear. And others, after some time, may decline events or activities entirely. Someone with a hearing loss may show some of the signs or none of these signs, but I hope this might put strange behaviors into an understandable context for you all. Now that I've so thoroughly established why hearing loss can impact conversations, I will finally deliver the practical tips that I promised at the beginning. Whenever possible, you can set the stage for easier communication. Maybe the most important thing you can do is to reduce background noise. Turn off a TV or a radio, shut the door to a busy hallway, Move into a quieter space. Hang curtains or have other textiles in the room, as this will dampen sounds and reverberations. You also want to set up the seating where the patient can see you clearly and where you can maintain eye contact with them. I have a saying in my family that if you can't see my eyes, I cannot hear you, because shouting from the other room just isn't a good communication strategy. If you're initiating a conversation, it's always good to get someone's attention first before jumping into whatever you have to say. Make sure the room has adequate and consistent lighting so they can see your lips and face. You do not want to be backlit or have the light right above you or below you, as this will shadow parts of your face. And make sure you do not cover your mouth when talking. It is so easy to lean on a fist or to talk while leaning forward to pick something up or to grab something behind you. But just pause, do your thing, and then return to what you were saying. Speak clearly and at a comfortable speed. Your speech should not be slow and exaggerated, and also not quickly and smushed together. Fast talkers and speakers with accents are just harder to understand. And this is maybe the most important tip I can give you is do not shout or over exaggerate. These strategies are not helpful because it distorts what you're saying and can come across as condescending. I always think about being on stage and trying to talk to someone in the front row. I will have to increase my volume, but I don't shout. I make sure that it's projected right at the person I am talking to. It's helpful to use hand gestures and clear facial expressions and body language to help convey your message. All of these tips become intuitive once you know and practice them, and they help my patients immensely. In fact, I've had many people tell me, if everyone talked like you do, I wouldn't need hearing aids, which I disagree with, but it's flattering. And then I am going to jump ahead because I see that I'm getting low on time to clinical accommodations. Clinical accommodations may change the way communication chain functions. It may not be spoken language directly back and forth between you and a patient. As we discussed, some people with hearing loss don't use spoken language at all. Individuals who use sign language as their primary mode of communication may need a sign language interpreter and may have a preference on whether the interpreter is in person or over a video call. People who are deafblind will need a tactile interpreter. For people who use listening and spoken language, they may benefit from writing or texting with office staff or providers. They may also request written outlines or directions at the beginning of the appointment, or written summaries or follow-up instructions after the appointment. There are also personal sound amplification products that are a great tool to use when someone doesn't have personal hearing devices. One common one is called a pocket talker. It's very easy to use. The patient wears a set of headphones and you talk into a microphone, which will amplify your voice for their ears. The patient can use the volume wheel on the device to choose how loud they want or need the output to be. And CART stands for Communication Access Real-Time Translation. It is a service that provides real-time captioning of spoken language. A CART provider, either in person or remote, uses a stenotype machine or a voice recognition software to transcribe spoken words into text as they are spoken. The words are presented on a screen for the patient to read. Any of these accommodations may be desired or required by a patient with a hearing loss in your clinic. These services here allow patients to communicate with someone outside of the clinic or when they are outside of the clinic calling in. The first is a video relay service. It's on a video phone. It allows a deaf caller to sign to an operator who will voice the signed message over the phone to a hearing person. And then the operator will sign the hearing person's spoken response back to the caller. This is often available 24/7 and provides real-time phone communication for someone who uses American Sign Language. A captioned telephone allows a person to make a phone call and read a real-time written transcription of what the other person on the line is saying. These phones also have amplified auditory options as well. The captioning service is provided from a specially trained communication assistant that transcribes the speech into text using voice recognition software. These devices are provided to people with hearing loss at no cost by the Federal Communications Commission. And then a TTY device is a text telephone or a teletypewriter. It allows someone to type text over a telephone line to another TTY device, or will connect to a relay operator who can then voice the texted messages to the person on an auditory phone line. This is less common now that most phones have texting, video relay services, are easily accessible with smartphones, and also with the invention of captioned telephones. This is just a general overview of accommodations you may need to provide to patients with hearing loss. So how do you know if someone needs clinical accommodations and what they prefer? It's so important that we as clinicians do not assume what works for our patients. They will know what's helpful to them and may be offended if non-applicable accommodations are selected for them without consulting them. An easily implementable project is the Communication Access Plan. Healthcare facilities can offer patients a communication access plan during the initial intake. This allows patients to make their preferences clear, and in some cases, it may inform the patient about accommodations they may not have known were available to them. And then right here at the end, there are some community resources. So the Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities, who's putting on this presentation, they have an advisory committee that I volunteer on. As Michelle said earlier, they also have on their website ways to get in touch with mental health facilities and crisis hotlines, including 988, which has texting, calling, online chat, and video phone available 24/7 for anyone who is having a mental health or substance use crisis. The community mental health centers across the region, some of them do have specific support for individuals with hearing loss. 7 Counties has a deaf therapist and a deaf case manager. They also have an adult and child family peer support specialist. Bridgehaven Mental Health Services has adult certified peer support specialists who are deaf and hard of hearing. And New Vista has a therapy clinician who signs and sees people who are hard of hearing. The Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, also known as OVR, they will help you access goods and services needed to achieve or hold employment. Another state organization is the Commission on the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Their website has information, resources, and links to other organizations. And then the last slide here are more individual groups. The Center for Accessible Living provides information with advocacy services that create opportunities for people with disabilities to live independently. The Kentucky Association of the Deaf. We have 3 chapters of Hearing Loss Association of America. And then Kentucky Hands and Voices is a group that supports families who have children with hearing loss across Kentucky. They have peer support and education and also host activities throughout the year. It's everything in the toolkit that I can give you about hearing loss. I hope that this information was practical and made sense. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ramsey. This is Michelle. That was a lot to cover in a very short amount of information, and you did an amazing job. We are going to take a very brief break while we get our next PowerPoint up, And then we'll get to hear more about cart services and about relay services. And I know you're probably thinking about all the things Dr. Ramsey shared. Please put questions in the chat. And if we don't get to them today, then we will be able to respond to those by email. So I'm going to thank you again, Dr. Ramsey, and Tracy, if you want to come on screen and share your PowerPoint, then we'll be able to move forward to the next part of our presentation. Thank you. And I'm not sure why we're getting a picture-in-picture here. Dr. Ramsey, if you can turn off your camera, that might help. And then I can turn mine off.
Michelle, how's that look?
This is Michelle. You are doing great. I apologize to participants. We had planned a brief break, but we have so much to share with you that we are not going to take that planned break. What you're seeing, though, is us making sure that our interpreters have determined what they need to do. They've been switching off and controlling our spotlight. And for that, we're grateful. It does take a little extra time to make sure that everyone has what they need. All right, Tracy, I am so grateful to have you here today. Can you give us an overview of CART, please?
Of course. My name is Tracy Lundergan. I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and my wonderful colleague Laura is actually captioning today. I'm not used to being on screen at these meetings and presentations. I am usually the one doing the captioning. So this is a little step out of my box today. So as Dr. Ramsey talked about before, CART stands for Communication Access Real-Time Translation, and it's a word-for-word speech-to-text service that displays complete translation of all spoken words and environmental sounds to faithfully communicate the integrity of the message. And the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, mandates the elimination of discrimination against people with disabilities. I know everybody knows what the ADA is. And CART is recognized as one of the assistive technology that affords effective communication access. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is a stenotype machine. And that's not my stenotype machine. My machine is purple. They come in all different kinds of fun colors, and purple is my favorite color. What you see on the left, the blue part of the screen, is one of my files that I took recently, and on to the right of that is actually what steno looks like. So when I write in steno on the right, my software takes the steno that I have written on my writer and turns it into English, such as you see on the left. We write phonetically, and the spoken word, and it involves syllables, and we've added every stroke of every word so that it translates into English into our software. And every provider has a different way or style of writing, but the end result is the same. So this slide talks about live captioner, which is what I do and what Laura does, versus auto-generated captions. And what's the difference? Human captioners are trained to recognize the context, sarcasm, and nonverbal cues like laughter, applause, or music, which AI sometimes misses. And this makes human captioning more reliable, especially for complex content with technical jargon or specialized vocabulary. Human captioners are generally more accurate and reliable, especially for complex or technically challenging content, while automated systems are faster and cheaper but can have lower accuracy rates. So you scheduled your event and you've lined up your speakers, you have your agenda, and now you need service providers. The biggest thing to send to a service provider, such as an ASL interpreter or a captioner, is everything you're going to use during your meeting. I want your agenda, speaker names, PowerPoints, anything I can get my hands on to help me prepare so that I can give the consumers the best product possible. Speaking at a reasonable speed is very helpful. Captioners are the ears of the consumers, and we want to do the best job we possibly can. So this is an example of what happens if I don't get the prep that I need. Hi, my name is Michelle Niehaus. If I didn't know that Michelle was going to be speaking, it might translate, hi, my name is Michelle Niehaus. So in my software, beforehand, I know that Michelle is going to be speaking and I can fix her last name to come up accurately. So where is CART beneficial? I've been in classrooms, corporate and government functions, community events, conventions and conferences, religious services, well, just about everywhere, courtrooms, weddings, funerals, and other personal events, anywhere communication access is needed. I've been to college a couple of times for law school. That was very interesting. I have been most recently to the University of Louisville Sports Administration program. I've been to grad school. That was fun too. I've talked about all of these places that CART is needed. So those other places were all in person. This is an example of what captioning would look like if you were, like today, in a Zoom session. So if you have an event that's on Teams or on Zoom, there are ways to use those platforms for a manual captioner for the consumer to follow along with the meeting and have captions on their device. They have, yes, their own AI captions, and the quality is getting better. But having a live captioner provides speaker identification and the nuances that the English language has that only a live human being can delineate with accuracy. If you're having a conference, those big screens that drop out of the ceiling, I've captioned to those as well in big halls. So using captions can lead to increased word recognition, vocabulary acquisition, and reading comprehension. I'm sure many of you guys have seen the stadium captioning. I myself have tickets to football here in Louisville, and I am always looking at the captions to see what happened because my husband gets tired of me asking him what just happened. So I can read the stadium captions. I also like to watch the captions on my TV for Netflix and Hulu. But those are not the same as a live person. So why CART? 1 out of 3 65-year-olds have hearing loss. I think Dr. Ramsey has gone over a lot of these statistics that I have on this PowerPoint slide. You talk about our young people, an estimated 17% of teenagers and 19% of people in their 20s have signs of the noise-induced hearing loss that she talked about. So it's important to have your hearing checked, and uncorrected hearing loss can lead to social isolation, cognitive decline, and potentially increase the risk of dementia. And captioning is one of the ways to keep people with hearing loss connected. So that probably went faster than I had anticipated, Michelle, but I'm finished.
Thank you so much, Tracy. You always have so much to share, and I know it feels weird to be on the other side of the machine, and it's great to hear your summary of the importance. I know that many people don't sign, they have hearing loss, and people think, oh, well, if I get an interpreter, that's enough. But it's really important for all providers to understand that some people may only use captioning, some people may only use sign, many people use both. And many people we found didn't know that they needed captioning until it was offered. And then all of a sudden they came up and they're like, oh, that actually really helped me. I see so much more. I understand so much more when I have that captioning. So we so appreciate your professionalism and your dedication to giving us quality CART services. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
It is very cool to see that Barclay is saying had no idea what went into it. It's very cool to see the picture of like what it looks like to you versus what we see on the screen. It's fascinating. I'm going to invite Peggy to come on screen now and give us an overview of Relay. And Tracy, if you can turn your camera off. Thank you. And Peggy, you are up. I'm going to turn my camera off, and then it'll be your show to share with us about Relay services, because that I think is also super confusing for people as well who don't understand all the different options. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Michelle. Boy, I've really got my work cut out for me going after Dr. Ramsey and Tracy. Anyway, okay. I want to go ahead and get started. And what I'm going to do over the next few minutes is just tell you a little bit about Relay Services, who they help, and the different services that are available specifically for the state of Kentucky. So, I am Peggy Ward. I'm an outreach coordinator. It has been previously mentioned, and I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so a lot of you probably do know some of this information, but Relay Services, these are services at no cost to individuals that are deaf, hard of hearing, deaf, blind, or anyone that has difficulty speaking, or anyone that has trouble being understood when they want to communicate over the telephone. And so these services are particularly exciting and a big deal for me because, as Michelle mentioned when she introduced me, I am a CODA. And so I was born in the 60s, and in the 60s, we didn't have relay services. And so both of my parents, they could not communicate over the phone. And that's really hard to even imagine now that people weren't allowed access to do something that's such a basic function that, we take for granted. But it was true. And so, they had no options. They had to rely on, family members like me. I was the oldest child, or a stranger or a neighbor. And I can't imagine being a parent and then having an emergency and not being able to hear or speak for myself to even call 911. So this definitely, these services gave everyone equal access, which we all deserve. And so with the ADA, that was the big factor in this in 1990. And then the FCC just made improvements upon the services and the equipment being accessible. And that's where we stand today is the services are all available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of the services do require specialized equipment. And 711, that is actually a nationwide number for relay services. So again, whether you are deaf or hard of hearing, or if you're someone that can hear and speak like myself, we can use the services at no cost to communicate with everyone. So it's great. Okay, so basically how it works, and each service is a little different, but we're going to start with the screen. We're going to say that a doctor's office is wanting to call someone that is deaf. And so as we see on the slide, we're going to say the deaf person is on the right, and you can see the little teletypewriter, the TTY, which I'm going to talk about that in a second. But the doctor's office would dial 711. That's going to put them in touch with that communication assistant. And that communication assistant is Hamilton Relay or Kentucky Relay. So, Hamilton Relay, we're not only in Kentucky, we actually provide relay services for 36 other states as well. And each state is set up differently depending on that contract that we have with them and what services that they choose to provide for all their residents. So the communication assistant is either going to use, they're going to type or they're going to use their voice to contact that customer. And in this case, we're saying it's someone that's deaf. And then it is a back and forth style of communication. So one person communicates at a time. They typically will use GA for go ahead to let the other person know it's time for them to go ahead and communicate. And then usually when they're finishing the conversation, they're going to use SK. If someone calls 711 and they have never used Relay before, the great thing about it is that communication assistant will explain to the person how Relay works, and kind of instruct them on how to manage the call. And so, like I said, this is a back and forth style of communication. So this is kind of basically how it works. Okay, so these are the traditional relay services that Hamilton provides for the state of Kentucky. And the TTY, it's been mentioned a couple of times today. And yes, the TTY is the first method of relay services. And it is more of an older method. Not as many people do use it. But the reason we even talk about it is we do still have customers in every state that still use it, in particular older customers. My mom is a perfect example. She's 86. The reason she sometimes still uses her TTY, she does still have a landline, and she does have some friends that can't afford internet and they don't have it. And so sometimes she has another friend that lives in a very rural area and the internet's not that great there. So they choose to communicate by TTY. And then my mom still does sometimes like using the TTY to schedule some of her doctor's appointments. So while there's a need, but eventually the TTY will be phased out. It's going to be replaced with something on your cell phone called real-time text or RTT. If you're not familiar with that feature, everyone more than likely has it. If you go under your settings, under accessibility, and you scroll down, you will see a RTT/TTY feature, and you can utilize that. But that's kind of a whole nother presentation. So we also have voice carryover and hearing carryover. Again, I don't talk about these a lot because these do require a landline still, but they are still being used. Voice carryover is for someone that does have their own voice. They can speak for themselves, but they have some form of hearing loss. So that communication assistant is used to help them in that manner with equipment. Hearing carryover is the opposite. They may have some form of hearing, but they can't speak for themselves or they're hard to understand. So, again, they may need assistance from a communication assistance with that. So those three are kind of the least used, but they still are. Speech to speech, I am actually going to talk about that in just a second on the next slide. I want to mention, though, deaf blind services. These services currently, there's a lot of progress being made. Currently, someone does have to be able to read Braille to use the deaf blind services for relay, but that is changing. And so, and I always mention to people, we really try to customize the services and assist them with the equipment based on where they are. So, even if someone maybe is losing their eyesight and they have low vision, maybe not specifically could they use, the deaf blind service, but a caption phone might be a perfect solution for them, at least for now, because those phones have a lot of customizations to help people with low vision. So that's just one example. And then, okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide. We're going to talk about Spanish and more about the caption phones. So speech to speech, or STS, this is a fantastic service that so many people are not aware of. I wasn't aware of this service being a CODA. And so this service is for anyone that has difficulty speaking or being understood on the phone. And there is a huge audience, per se, that can use this service. It can be for someone that stutters, someone that's had a laryngectomy, Parkinson's, a traumatic brain injury. The list just goes on and on. And so even children that have autism, depending on where they are in that journey, I mean, so the list is really long. And so the great thing is there is no specialized equipment. They can use any type of phone in order to utilize this service. And we do have the communication assistant. In this instance, that individual has specialized training. They are going to revoice and clarify what that user says as needed. So they are taught and trained about voice recognition, speech patterns, things like that. Next is Spanish Relay. Again, not a lot of people know about this, but it is a Spanish-based relay service. It's available for every call type that I just mentioned. And this isn't just like a free-for-all translation service. Again, you need to either be, trying to communicate with someone that's deaf, hard of hearing, etc. And it can either be Spanish to Spanish or it can be Spanish to English. Okay, so the caption telephone, we do use CapTel. There's a lot of great caption telephones out there. This is just what Hamilton, who we prefer to use. But the caption phones, they are designed for individuals with hearing loss who do speak for themselves. And so just like I think Tracy mentioned this, and Dr. Ramsey, that it's very similar to where your television has the captions on the screen. That's how these phones work as well. And we actually do offer both specialized technology and a captioning assistant or a captionist. And I actually totally do agree with what Tracy was saying about this. I think for relay, the specialized technology, we're trying to give people all the options they want. And so with that, I think, for example, let's say somebody just maybe wanted to call and order a pizza. Okay. Maybe they just want to use the specialized technology for that. But let's say that they are wanting to get some kind of test results from the doctor and that's obviously more confidential type of information. I would recommend that they use the captionist or the captioning assistant. So again, they have both options and with CapTel and some of our other services. They can switch back and forth. And then there also is with Caption Phone in the past, you had to have both a landline and internet, and that has changed. So with CapTel, we have a phone that is available if they only have a landline and don't have internet. There's available if they have both, which is kind of their traditional, which is internet and a landline. And now there is a phone for internet only. It's called a VoIP line. And we've just had that. It hasn't even been a year, but it is huge. People are super excited about it. So I wanted to mention that. So the different caption telephone services that are available is the caption phone that they can still have like at their home or even at a business. There's internet-based CapTel, there's web CapTel, and we also have a free app that they can download on their smartphones to where they can have the captions on their mobile phone, which is fantastic. People are very excited about that as well. And, I know this was mentioned earlier, but, just like with anything, people do not realize how much of these conversations they are missing out on. And it's such a neat part of my job when because I typically go in and will set up the phone and train them on it at their home or, their resident community, wherever they're living. And to see their faces when they start making these phone calls and they can hear everything or read everything. Again, it is life-changing for a lot of them. They have no idea how much of these conversations they've been missing with their family and their friends and their loved ones. So it's fantastic. Okay, I do want to mention VRS. Sorenson provides this for the state of Kentucky, and I know it was mentioned earlier. But again, this is a preferred service for a lot of the deaf community. And I know I mentioned my mom using the TTY. She uses VRS all the time as well. So there is someone that's using sign language and an interpreter to communicate. They typically will have video phone, a computer like with a webcam, or some other kind of video enabled device. They do need an internet connection. And then it's typically not considered a communication assistant. It's a video interpreter, and they just voice what that relay user signs and signs that person's responses. I wanted to mention that one thing that we do provide to different businesses and organizations statewide in Kentucky is we offer a free training to assist businesses on how to place and how to receive calls through Relay. Y'all would not believe, well, you might, how many people get hung up on when it is a deaf or hard of hearing person trying to use Relay to contact a business. That business has no clue what it is. And with all the robocalls and the spam calls, it's gotten worse. So, it's very frustrating for everybody when they get hung up on. When, maybe someone that's deaf's just trying to call your business to inquire about it. Maybe they want to become a customer. Maybe they just have a general question and they keep getting hung up on. So, again, I love this part of my job where I go out and I can either do it virtually or I can train different businesses on how to facilitate these calls and how to, understand them a little better. And then we also provide a free listing of your business on the Relay website. Okay, I wanted to mention a couple of award programs that we have. We do have a high school scholarship program. This is in every state that we're contracted with. It is $1,000 scholarship to any senior that's deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind, or has difficulty speaking. And I want to say that every year I've been here, we have had a high school scholarship winner in Kentucky, which I absolutely love. It is so uplifting and amazing to see these young adults and what they have accomplished, what they are doing to advocate for the communities. I just love it. And then, in addition to that, we also have a Hamilton Relay Community Leader Award. And so, this is, I think a lot of people on this call actually could probably be nominated for this. So I wanted to mention it here. But this is to recognize an individual or an organization that is deaf, deafblind, hard of hearing, late deafened, or has difficulty speaking, and they demonstrate strong leadership, they're an advocate, and they volunteer within the community. And again, it doesn't have to be an individual, it can be an organization that advocates as well. So the nominations for this start actually today. And this runs through October 2025. So if you know of anybody that you would like to nominate, I would highly encourage that, and I can get you that information. And then my last slide just has my contact information. I do want to mention that, the services are at no cost. The equipment, Kentucky has a great program with their equipment distribution program through TAP, which stands for the Telecommunication Access Program, that is through KCDHH. And not only do they have things like the phones, but they have all other types of equipment available that individuals can get. And so, again, I just wanted to thank y'all for allowing me to present this information. And hopefully, I didn't talk too long and we can have some time for some questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Peggy. You did an amazing job of giving a lot of information in a short amount of time. Oh, keep your camera on, ma'am. Nice try. Okay. I really appreciate you wrapping us up like that as well, because I think when we think about the world, sometimes it's easier to think about what we don't have, but we have wonderful leaders in Kentucky. We have up and coming students. We have lots of wonderful things happening. And everybody on this call, our presenters and our attendees, all want to make communication access for all a reality. So thank you for that. I'd like to invite our presenters all to come back on camera. And we are running out of time, but if folks would want to put a question or two in the chat, we can probably do that. And also, I just want to thank you all for your emphasis on connection, on community. Oh. On giving people choices. We always need to have toolboxes, right? It's not a one size fits all for access at all. So I really appreciate the emphasis you each had on how we can all meet people where they're at and help with their recovery and with their healing. So thank you so much for all of your information. I'm not seeing questions in the chat. I'm guessing we're getting some Friday afternoon overwhelm at this point, but I am so grateful for each of you. And we are being asked, what is the name of the app for captioning? It's Hamilton Relay is the company that we were talking with today. And that is Kentucky's relay service. I'll be sending out the PowerPoints, and please feel free to email me back with questions. And if I can't answer it, these lovely ladies can, because they are a wealth of information. Thank you so much to Dawn and to Shannon. Shannon did double duty and did all of our spotlights today as well, and I'm grateful for that. And for Laura Kogut, our captioner today. Thank you all so much. Do you have any final thoughts or questions or things to wrap us up?
This is Peggy. I just wanted to thank you, Michelle, for putting all this together. You did a great job.
Thank you. You made it easy. I have a cool job. I get to meet these amazing people who do good work every day. All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great weekend.
Thank you.
And Anthony, you can stop the recording.